Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some battles featuring the brand new legacy move on Yveltal, Oblivion Wing. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now Oblivion Wing is a flying type charge move. It costs the same energy as Dark Pulse, but it deals 10 more damage. Now this trainer pairs it up with a Terrakion lead and a Zacion save switch, and has some pretty nice sets with it. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Oblivion Wing Yveltal in action in the Master League. Hopping into the first match, and we see a tough matchup leading Terrakion into Zacion. Zacion is a core breaker for this team, as we see some lag as well, definitely not ideal. Terrakion, unfortunately, and Yveltal both take super effective damage from Zacion, but that's definitely going to help, landing the rock slide and making a beautiful catch, catching the close combat onto the Zacion. Opponent staying into the mirror match, and they're going to fire off a charge move. Nothing they throw can KO here, so pretty safe, no shield. Opponent goes for the wild charge, switches into Dialga, and they end up catching a play rough. Since Zacion is not running close combat, that's honestly the move that Zacion wants to throw anyway. Zacion makes it to another play rough, and this should just about be lethal, so the opponent, if they want switch, is going to have to commit a shield. They commit the shield, they get the farm down, and they leave with a lot of energy, and Iron Head hits for massive super effective damage onto Terrakion, so we will see a shield from the Terrakion. But now Terrakion will be able to overfarm, as we've seen from Cobalion and Virizion in the Ultra League. That double kick Sacred Sword combination is extremely powerful. We're going to see the Zacion being brought back in, but Terrakion fires off the Rock Slide. Rock Slide will be shielded by the Zacion. Zacion firing off a charge move, and from here, you can just let this go. Oblivion Wing allows Yveltal to hit for neutral against fairy types, so from this range, honestly, Yveltal can KO. Wild Charge will be shielded in the back. It's a Lugia, and Lugia is going to have to deal with an energy lead Yveltal, which is not a great situation for it to be in. Dark Pulse connects onto the Lugia. Yveltal over farming by one and playing to the CMP tie as they make it to the Aeroblast. Dark Pulse will KO. In comes the Zacion, but Yveltal makes it to the Oblivion Wing, and that will be game over as Oblivion Wing takes down Zacion. Moving into the next match, we see another tough lead, Terrakion into Therian Landorus. Landorus does well into both the Terrakion and the Yveltal, so Terrakion will need to stay in this matchup. Opponent overfarms quite a bit with the Landorus, allowing Terrakion to connect with the Rock Slide and deal some very nice damage. Terrakion loses CMP on the Sacred Sword, just gonna let it go, but the opponent, anticipating a shield and not wanting to debuff themselves, went for a resisted Stone Edge, and that's going to cost them shield advantage. Opponent overfarming, they're not going to make the same mistake twice. They will now go for the superpower, KOing Terrakion, but Terrakion got this Landorus low, it got it debuffed, and on top of that, it also grabbed a shield advantage. So Terrakion put in some nice work despite a very difficult lead matchup. Zacion looking for the farm down, but not before Landorus makes the second Stone Edge. Zacion deciding to shield, wanting to preserve some HP, and now the Zacion has close to 100 energy. What is the opponent going to send in here? Opponent's thinking about it. They're going to send in their own Zacion to absorb this energy. Since this is a Snarl Zacion, Zacion, after landing 2 play roughs, is not going to be able to farm down, unfortunately. Firing off play rough number 2, opponent continues to farm up energy. Play rough will get the opponent extremely low. Zacion at the back-to-back wild charges if they have them. Wild charge will KO. In comes Yveltal, but Yveltal is going to have to give up a shield here, as this is a wild charge. Opponent actually went for a close combat there, and in the back, they have their own Yveltal, so now we get to see the battle of Yveltal. Let's see, does the opponent have Oblivion Wing, or are they running Focus Blast? They're running Focus Blast, so now we get to see Focus Blast versus Oblivion Wing in the mirror. Oblivion Wing will be no-shielded by the opponent, farming up with the Yveltal. Yveltal very close to the back-to-back moves. It looks like this is going to come down to CMP. Oblivion Wing gets the shield, and it's a CMP tie, but Oblivion Wing will get the KO of the opponent's Yveltal, and that's a good game. Picking up a dream lead in the next match, Terrakion into Mamoswine. Opponent is going to save switch into Metagross, and Metagross will be answered by Yveltal. Yveltal farming up energy, but Metagross with the energy lead able to outpace and grab an early shield with Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash does not KO, but it does massive damage, so Yveltal trying to preserve a lot of HP here. Yveltal goes for the Dark Pulse into the Metagross, that's gonna KO. In comes Mamoswine, and now Yveltal can fire off Oblivion Wing. Oblivion Wing, as I mentioned at the start, is a stronger move than Dark Pulse, so in neutral situations you will want to go for Oblivion Wing. Mamoswine will KO with the Avalanche. Back in comes Terrakion. In the back, opponent has some serious spice for the Open Master League. They have a Shadow Gyarados. Rock Slide gets the shield, continuing to farm with Terrakion, and this is Gyarados' worst nightmare, a Zacion, and it's a Zacion running Wild Charge. They go for the Aqua Tail. Zacion tanks that very comfortably, and they're firing off another Aqua Tail. Again, the no shield from the Zacion. Zacion farming up to the back-to-back Wild Charges, and this is absolutely game over. Wild Charge will one-shot the Gyarados. In comes the Mamoswine. Unfortunately, no close combat on the Zacion means that a Play Rough will have to be thrown here. Play Rough gets the shield. Mamoswine gets the farm down, but bad news for the Mamoswine. Terrakion wins CMP, knocks out with the Sacred Sword, and gets the win. We've got an interesting lead in the next match. Terrakion into Rayquaza. Terrakion, of course, can hit for super effective damage with the Rock Slide, but Rayquaza wins CMP, and every Breaking Swipe that is thrown will continue to debuff Terrakion. Terrakion is going to be firing off the Rock Slide into Rayquaza. Rayquaza will commit the shield, continuing to farm up with the Terrakion. Terrakion goes for the Rock Slide, and it's caught on Groudon. But there's a reason why you don't save switch Groudon in the Master League. If the opponent has a flying type, you are absolutely helpless. So the opponent ends up getting a nice catch, making that Rock Slide deal basically no damage, but then they get punished by Oblivion Wing Yveltal. Yveltal fires off Oblivion Wing. That does big damage onto the Groudon. Unfortunately, not going to be enough damage for the Yveltal to snarl down. Yveltal able to withstand the Fire Punch. Yveltal continuing to farm and going for Oblivion Wing number 2. Now this will be lethal. Opponent not going to be shielding in that bad of a matchup. Back in comes Rayquaza. Rayquaza firing off the Breaking Swipe. That's going to be no shielded, and making the Oblivion Wing is Yveltal. Oblivion Wing, even when debuffed, is going to grab a shield from Rayquaza. In comes Zacion. In the back, opponent has Heatran. This is definitely a situation where having close combat would be incredibly nice. Zacion firing off the Wild Charge. Wild Charge still does some solid chip damage, and going for Wild Charge number 2. This Wild Charge will connect into the Heatran, not quite able to knock out, but gets the Heatran deep into the red. Heatran goes for Magma Storm. We see a switch into Terrakion, getting the snipe. Back in comes Rayquaza. Rayquaza firing off a charge move. We see the no shield, and it is going to be the Breaking Swipe, and even debuffed, this Play Rough is still going to absolutely crush Rayquaza. Rayquaza now double debuffs the Zacion. Zacion actually going for the double Wild Charge here. Wild Charge number 1 gets them low, and Wild Charge number 2 will get the KO, and that's game over. Tough lead for Terrakion in the next match as it leads into Giratina Origin. 2 better responses in the back, immediate save switch into Zacion, and the opponent is going to respond with their own Zacion. So the opponent does not have a good response to the Zacion save switch, and switching in a Zacion mirror at an energy disadvantage means you're probably going to be losing switch. Opponent has farmed up to the back-to-back Wild Charges here. They go for Wild Charge number 1, but they lose CMP on Wild Charge number 2. Opponent is debuffed. This will be lethal. They commit the shield, but the opponent should now be on the 4 cycle, whereas this Zacion is on the 3 cycle. So the opponent now just straight up going to lose switch advantage no matter what they do. Another Wild Charge fired into the opponent's Zacion. Opponent is going to let that through. They lose switch, and that means Giratina is going to have a terrible time going up against Yveltal. Due to the debuff defense, Zacion not able to make the Play Rough, forced to settle for the last second Wild Charge. In comes Yveltal in the back. It's Geomancy Xerneas, and this is incredibly bad. Xerneas already at a charge move. Terrakion taking super effective damage. It gets one shot by the Moonblast, and now Yveltal is in a dire situation. Yveltal farming up, going for the Oblivion Wing, losing CMP to Xerneas on the Moonblast. Now, Oblivion Wing does help Yveltal quite a bit in this matchup, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be enough to flip it. As you can see, 2 Oblivion Wings are going to be enough to KO, but the issue is that was a CMP tie. So, we see Yveltal so close to the back-to-back Oblivion Wings, but just cannot get there. Moonblast KOs Yveltal, and that's game over. Terrakion finds an amazing lead in the next match as it leads into Dialga. This is a rough spot for the opponent. They're going to stay in this matchup, maybe looking for a catch. They go for the catch onto Lugia. Great patience, holding onto the energy. And now Terrakion gets the Lander Rock Slide. Rock Slide connects onto the Lugia. Terrakion farming up, banking a Sacred Sword for later, and sending in Zacion. Even if they full send the Aeroblast here, Zacion will be able to tank this and not even be in the red. Aeroblast connects, Lugia gets the boost from Aeroblast, and oh boy, this is potentially looking dire now that Lugia gets the boost, but the opponent is going to let Lugia go, and they send in Dialga. Zacion not running close combat, forced to go for the Play Rough here. Play Rough will be shielded up by the Dialga. Dialga gets a big farm down. Terrakion did leave with energy. In comes Terrakion, and Terrakion going straight for the Sacred Sword, putting pressure onto Dialga. Dialga is going to double shield, and shields down is looking quite good for the duo of Terrakion and Yveltal. In the back, it's Kyogre, and we see an immediate switch into Yveltal. Yveltal, as always, is going to be going for Oblivion Wing in these neutral matchups, as it does more damage than Dark Pulse. Continuing to farm up here, going for the Oblivion Wing, losing CMP to Kyogre. This is enough for the Blizzard, and they have it. That is a massive shield, and now firing off the Oblivion Wing to get the KO. Down goes Kyogre, but this potentially could be problematic here. Going to fire off the Dark Balls. I think we're going to need to see a snipe with the energy from Terrakion. Yveltal can't get the farm down. Goes for the Sacred Sword and loses CMP to the Dialga. Ironhead KOs, and that's game over. We see same leads again in the next match, Terrakion versus Dialga. Opponent save switches into Mewtwo, and they're gonna regret that decision as in comes Yveltal. Even if they have Ice Beam, which they do, Yveltal comfortably able to tank it, look to overfarm, and fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse, of course, will be lethal. How much is the opponent willing to commit to this matchup? Turns out not at all. They're just gonna send in Dialga, get the farm down, and look for an energy head start to potentially outpace the Terrakion. But the issue with that is that Terrakion banked energy before switching out. Yveltal fires off the Dark Pulse. That wasn't quite enough for the Focus Blast, so the opponent knows they can no-shield it. Terrakion so spammy with that double kick Sacred Sword combination, able to get the KO onto Dialga, and it's Kyogre in the back. Firing off the Sacred Sword, just looking for some chip damage onto Kyogre. Kyogre commits a shield, and now this Wild Charge is about to deal devastating damage to Kyogre. Kyogre firing off the Surf. We should see the shield from the Zacion here, and then Zacion can start firing off charge moves. Going for the Wild Charge into Kyogre, and things are just looking extremely rough for the opponent here. That's nearly going to one-shot, and from here, I mean, you can double kick down, or in this case, shield, and just get the Snarl down. Hopping into the final match, and we see one final amazing lead for Terrakion with Mamoswine. Mamoswine choosing to stay in this matchup. Now they send in Dialga, and they are absolutely core broken by Terrakion. Terrakion putting in massive damage onto Dialga, continuing to farm, and making it to a second Sacred Sword. This will be lethal. Opponent will commit the shield. Now we see a pivot into Zacion. Zacion will be able to tank an Ironhead here if it wants to, or it can decide to shield. Ironhead will be no-shielded. Zacion can now choose to massively overfarm and go for the Play Rough. Throwing Play Rough is a bit of a clue into the opponent that the Zacion is not running close combat, so then they can pretty safely send in the Mamoswine. And that's exactly what they're going to do. Mamoswine looking for the farm down. Now Zacion going for the Play Rough. Will the opponent let this through? They will. Opponent making the right read. In comes Terrakion, and Terrakion has to decide, does it want to preserve HP? Yes, it does. Shielding up the Avalanche. Terrakion can't quite get the farm down. Mamoswine leaves a parting shot of one final Avalanche. in the back. It's Palkia going to be firing off this Stone Edge. Sorry, Rock Slide, not a Stone Edge. It would be crazy if it got Stone Edge. And now you can just send in Yveltal. Yveltal farming up and going for Oblivion Wing. Palkia will need to Draco Meteor to get the KO here. Oblivion Wing deals massive damage to the Palkia, and the Palkia accidentally overfarms too much. Oblivion Wing takes down the Palkia, and that's a good game. All in all, Oblivion Wing does look like an interesting side grade for Yveltal. Sacrificing the fighting type coverage of Focus Blast does limit your options versus Dialga, but it does turn Yveltal into a bit more of a neutral Pokemon, as with Oblivion Wing, it can potentially fight back against the fairy types like Xerneas and Zacion. So I would say, is it strictly better? No. I would say that you can probably find a use for Oblivion Wing. You could even potentially choose to run an Oblivion Wing Focus Blast set, although losing that consistent neutral damage that Dark type has against a lot of the meta is honestly could be a bit risky, but all in all, it's a pretty solid move. I think most people will probably stick with Dark Pulse Focus Blast since they don't have to use an Elite TM, but if you do want to end up raiding for one, it is a pretty nice move, and as you can see, you definitely can get some wins with it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.